everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Christina and I are, very happy that you're spending some time with us. If you have questions at any time, please pop up chat on the bottom. We have actually also Jashant as our coordinator helping as well. So we'll try to answer any of your questions. If not, in the end, we have our emails, Vasil at MoEngage and Christina at MoEngage, and you can always reach out to us that way. But Christina, again, thank you for working on this. Christina is one of our head of CSM here for North America, working with our big enterprise customers. And today we wanted to kind of share with you our thoughts on what is life after COVID engagement look like? What do you need to start thinking about? What are we seeing that works in other parts of the world? And what can you do to really prepare? We're seeing quite a few states trying to reopen. Not California, we have another month now, mandatory lockdown. But there are some interesting indications that in other parts of the world, things are starting to move a little bit more. So Christina, take it away. And again, we'll try to keep this very interactive. And if you have any questions, guys, do ping us and we'll try to incorporate that in the webcast.
Awesome. Super excited to be with you guys today. I'm happy it's sunny in New York. Those of you who are from this East Coast area have been having a ton of rain. But yeah, we were excited to kind of piggyback the webinar that we had a couple of weeks back where we talked about what people were doing as a result of the lockdowns and in response to, oh, this is a real thing and what do we do now? And the communications that were coming out then. And we talked about this idea of like essential communication, which is, the functional is our stores are closing and we've seen a ton of that. The essential space that we were trying to push or talk to you guys to talk to brands about was the space where we talk more about where the user is, where the user is, or the brand is actually looking to talk to the user in a more empathic way. And so it's more with that light that we're kind of looking to say, well, a lot of brands have kind of stepped up and done that. But we do know that a lot is shifting today in the space. So we wanted to talk, like Vasil said, about what happens after things open up and what should brands be doing to prepare. And we also have some really cool examples because we heard the last time that the examples are really neat of brands that we think are kind of doing a really, really great job about that within the travel and the retail industry. So we'll jump right in here. And so no news here. We talked about this idea of a new normalcy. We know that consumer sentiment has shifted greatly. I wanted to just show you and start with something light. One of the brands that we know have stepped up, and it's kind of early for some Jack Daniels, but bear with us here. Wanted to play this ad that kind of just talks about the space that we think the brands that are going to survive are living in today. And this is one example. So I'll go right back, sorry. Sorry about that.
Just use the arrows here.
My mouse is really sensitive.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, though I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all. Darkness inside you can make you feel so small. I see your true colors shine through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful. I miss you.
Miss you. I mean, I just thought that was so poignant, right? I mean, it's moving. It talks about where we are today. It brings the humanity out to the user. And so, one of the things that Jack Daniels did a really nice job of is understanding that concern. The level of concern about COVID has really grown. I think we thought of this thing as, not a big city thing for those in smaller cities, or not even a U.S. thing for that matter. And we've gradually, if you look at this data graphic from Statista, looking at how we've gone from not super concerned to very concerned in the last couple of months. And in the throes of that is us trying to see the light, right? Where will this thing end? In the late, one of the things that brands are doing right now is seeing that consumers are really concerned. They're trying to kind of unpack that. And so we're seeing tons of CEOs right now, especially I would say of like global companies who have a footprint, I would say in some of the earlier hit areas like China, Korea and such, take, examples or look at what the pandemic has done to their businesses there and try to make sense of it, right? And bring some of the learnings that they have from those particular regions and optimize them for maybe the US market. And you see this quote here from Chip Bergh, that this is a sense of shock, right? We've gone through something that has been really traumatic, and whether or not we're realizing it in the moment or whether or not this is something that we'll realize in hindsight, we're in it right now, and our mindsets are shifting constantly because of it. And so he's saying, the more cooped up we stay, the more shock there will be for us to kind of, and the longer it will take for us to kind of feel a sense of normalcy, right? So, as we start to see brands and react to this and respond to markets opening up, it'll be really interesting to see what some of these guys do. I thought this was interesting. So I was doing some research about this whole thing, and we've all gone through the motions, right? We go through, and I think it's hard to kind of put a finger on it. I have a kid, so I'm watching him daily and seeing how this might impact him. And, he's little, so it's how would he express how he's feeling to me? And I talked to his teacher, and, a lot of the kids in his class, he's in kindergarten and she's in contact with the parents, are going through and expressing, what they're feeling for as a result of the lockdown and their own understanding of coronavirus in their own unique ways, through art, through, all these different really interesting ways that us parents are now going, wow, they get it, and understand way more than we get. So one of the things that I uncovered was the Kubler-Ross change curve, and this is really like the grief curve. And I will say that this was created by a doctor, a psychiatrist in the late 60s. And, this was from her own observations of how we process a traumatic event. And so one of the things she always said is this is not linear. But what I thought was really interesting for us today is to talk about where and how all of these phases kind of fit and how they're shifting and where all of our consumers are going to rest across these different phases, right? So we have shock, denial, frustration, depression, experimentation, decisioning, and integrating. And so when we get to the integrating part, that's really when we're talking about kind of reassimilating back to whatever the normal is, if it is the old normal or if it is a new normal, which is what we're facing today. I thought, interestingly, that New York City, we've gone through the shock, we've gone through the denial, probably a little bit of the frustration, but and kind of getting past that depression mode in many respects and going towards like this experimentation role, which is looking for a path forward, right? What does that look like? And what Vasil and I talked about is that, different states and different communities are going to be at different points along this trajectory, and so are your consumers. So if you're a national brand, how are you looking at this and talking to each, really personalizing at scale? I hate to use that cliche, but really honestly understanding Christina sits in New York. New York was hard hit. Are there other things, like how do I speak to her versus how do I speak to someone in a place that might have had less of a halo effect for the pandemic?
Yeah, and the one thing that we also kind of were discussing here, guys, is that it's not just the location. Location is just one factor.
Yep.
Different verticals are going to be in a different dot there. Different demographic groups are going to be in a different dot there in terms of where they are. Some people that, for example, are hit harder, like the 20 some million that are out of a job are going to be hit harder. So they're going to be lower in the curve, and it's going to take them a while before they can start traveling again or buying a lot of stuff other than essentials. So you have to really understand and personalize your experience and really do new retargeting, do new segmentation based on what is happening and where your customers are and who what's in specific cases that you're dealing with there.
Yeah, and I think we're not going to belabor this, but we found 3 factors that we think are really going to be pushed to the forefront that marketers need to kind of again unravel. Right? It's like how are my customers feeling? And there's so many striations here, right? It's a personal, the things that we might not know unless we ask questions, surveys, etc. How have you been impacted by COVID? How do and figure out how the brand helps, and if there's an opportunity to do that. There's also, aside from personal, there's the community aspect of it, right? There's some communities that are really banded together. There's some communities where the individual is kind of, they're more individualistic, and so you're kind of dealing with these things in silo. There's, as Vasil mentioned, there's the economic capabilities, right? What kind of discretionary income do you have? And we'll talk about this when we talk about retail, that there's a new definition of luxury today, right? And in many ways, in many respects across the country. The idea that, how, and, brands and how industries, we're starting to see industry level responses as well, which is great. And we'll talk about that too, how they respond, both, from a strategic standpoint, how they talk to you, operationally, what they do. And then from an innovation standpoint, will also impact what life will look like once we continue to move towards life after COVID. So we luckily, and we talked about this too, and I find it fascinating. So I'm trying to find all these tidbits of information and again, trying to loosely make hypotheses about what will happen here. With the lift of the ban in China, there's this saying, the new term called revenge travel. There's also revenge shopping, where people are actually, where the country expected, and the airlines there expected it to be an L curve in terms of, coming back slowly, they just skyrocketed. And so folks are traveling more. They've seen 3 times increase in bookings between April 1st and April 15th, which versus a year ago. And some of this, there are some, erroneous factors, I'm sure, people who might have been not where they wanted to be and trying to get out, et cetera. But it's still a huge increase, right? And they're also saying that there's a 282% increase in the number of travelers. And this is across airlines, planes, you name it. They've just seen this spike, and that's been fascinating to a ton of people. So we're kind of keeping a pulse on that, because as we think about the segments that we talked about and just all those different, shifts that we're going through, right? Which from, again, the shocks all the way through the integration part that we talked about from the Kubler-Ross curve, we have identified too some buckets of users, and we're going back to some of the tried and trues, right? So we're going back to the adoption curve that we know so well in technology and in products, branding and marketing, to say, well, what can we expect and how do we expect users to start to re-engage with us? And when we talk about engagement, there's soft measures. So they're, engaging with the app or with you on visiting your website, those types of things that we can measure today. But then there's the hard measures, like the long term, which is the commerce piece of it. Are they buying, booking, et cetera? We mapped these revenge travelers that we're seeing as these early optimists, right? The small majority, these are the risk takers. I mean, this is really in lockstep with the way that the curve is designed anyway. They're the folks who are like, look, life is what it is. I'm getting out. I'm ready to go. And so you'll see that 2.5% of the population kind of just continue as if nothing ever happened. Then you'll start to see it, you know, the confident realists, right? All the way through the majority, which are kind of a little bit more pragmatic and watchful, you know, looking to see kind of tippy-toeing into life as normal and maybe into purchasing and re-engaging with brands more fully. And then there's the 16% or so that we kind of hypothesize are going to be really reluctant to kind of return to life as normal. And again, I mean, this is not simple. This is super complex because some of the factors driving their behavior could also be due to, you know, again, socioeconomic. They could be socioeconomic. They could be that they've lost someone that was a key breadwinner in the household. There's so many things at play that one of the things that we really know that we want to do is really understand, you know, what new emerging segments will be, or categories of segments will be kind of unbridled for your brand. And getting to that point is something that we're going to talk about too. We tried to kind of take a stab at just the mindset of some of these guys, and I won't belabor this and you guys can look at this later, but the early optimist is like the faster we return to normal, the better, right? They're bullish about it, they're ready. Immediate return to normalcy. The confident realist, things can't stay this way, so we must adapt. So they're cautious, but they're looking to return to normalcy in specific areas of their life, but they're realistic about it. Watchful pragmatists, right? So again, these guys are like, time will tell, but we're going to take some small steps forward, and I'm hopeful, and we're going to do the steady crawl. And then we have, these are the folks that are going to have a heavy lift for these risk averse, right, groups, and they're kind of lost in the way things were. They're looking for a much slower, more deliberate creep back to life before COVID, and that kind of transcends everything that they're going to do in terms of spend, engagement, etc. So tend to have a little bit more of a pessimistic outlook. We didn't blow this out fully, but there is a huge opportunity for brands to take some of these buckets. Like, these might not all apply to you guys, you know, apples to apples, but if you take some of the high level mindset insights here, and you look at your own user base and try to understand how people are falling against these, and maybe you'll discover some new ones, right? We think this is a huge opportunity for recency, frequency, and monetary modeling to kind of figure out what those indicators are for you and to help you to revamp your segmentation post-COVID, right? And this is going to be an ongoing thing. You're going to hear us talking about test, optimize, test, learn, optimize, repeat, right? So this is going to be something that you're going to constantly be doing for, I would say, for the next couple of years until things start to feel a little bit more normal, and time does that, right? Because the memory fades. But this early optimistic, we have to do this, you know, what's, you know, for your brand, who is this person, right? What are the key indicators, both behavioral and demographic, that we can look to? What goal would you want for them? You know, knowing where they sit. An early optimist, you would assume, is ready to convert. A call to action asking them to do that should be fine, and we can test that, right? So that's one thing. For someone who is maybe a more the more majority group, the pragmatists, it's, you know, they're looking for validation in their social groups. So word of mouth and user generated content, that kind of stuff will really resonate well with them. And then you can look again at using your data to understand how best to talk to these users. And again, that is constantly shifting and evolving, and it has evolved so acutely because of COVID that we really have to take a step back and unlearn what we think we know about our users and kind of press forward with new data that is based on history, but also predictive.
Yeah, and this is where, guys, whatever segmentations you did before, you got to forget about it. You almost have to start from scratch and test new things. And we're seeing, for example, airlines testing a whole bunch of new things. So we have a couple examples coming up, but I saw that there were deals for going to Paris later in the year for $220 to $250. You can go to Hong Kong from the US for high 400s. Usually this is like $900 trip, and they're not charging you for luggage. And this is actually with the US airline brands. This is not, Cathay Pacific or anything else like that. So the companies are already trying to figure out what is going to work, pushing a whole bunch of offers out there, and starting to engage and test. They're testing what resonates with one group, with another, and then again, testing again, coming up with new offers and new things. So lots of opportunities to go after the revenge travel people and others that have been, just so desperate to get out of the house or are going to need to travel.
100%. I think right now, brands have, we're in the mode of selling, of course, right? Because you're either selling a product or service, but you really are looking to figure out, how do I build that pipeline now? And testing is really a good way to do that. And that's what the airlines are doing. They're built out in the US at least through September, but they need people to start traveling before that and after that. So they need to make sure that they have those bookings and, continue to communicate that travel is great, travel's, cool, and showcase people traveling so that people feel like this is something that I can actually do. Because I think we're gonna be looking to each other a lot to see if something's safe to do. We're looking for examples. We're looking for proof points amongst ourselves. And so that'll keep happening. So the first thing we're going to unwrap though is retail, right? Really dense. I mean, retail is so broad. But we have some postulations. We're going to chat a little bit about this, about what we think will be expected for retail coming forward. And some of these are obvious, right? Like experiential shopping. There's no other way for the most part, other than grocery shopping, where we tend to go to the store. I still do. To do this, right? So it's this idea of, how do we make that a unique, cool experience? And I've actually found myself where I was dismissive of like some of the AR and VR stuff that was baked into like the Target app, for example. I've gotten like the decorating bug. And so I'm starting to walk around my house looking like crazy, but I'm using the augmented reality to put pictures up. And it's been actually a feature that I thought I would never really latch onto, and I have. So that's something that's going to be keen. One thing that I found that is so true, when you're looking for that Bounty paper towel and you can't find it, and that's the brand that is stuck in your brain. And so now you're looking, okay, so what's next? And, the brand that's like 3 or 4 tiers down, even the store brand, which is fine, that you just never noticed before, becomes like your saving grace. This is where people are making these loyalty trade-offs, right? And so I find it energizing, because this is an opportunity for a lot of the incumbent brands, if you will, or the ones who aren't leading in their space, to kind of create an experience for users that grabs them and says, oh, look, this is actually probably a little bit more less costly, and it still works great. So this is a huge time for trial of brands that we never thought that we would ever probably try or didn't know existed, right? This reimagination of, buy it online, pick it up in the store, which I've done a ton, and I'm starting to see that this is probably the way that things are going to be. I saw a clip for Texas that just reopened, and so this small business owner, and she's in front of her store saying, we haven't figured out the logistics of this 100%, but this is something that small stores, big stores have been doing this. What happens to like the small business owner with a boutique, right? How do they navigate this kind of BOPIS landscape too?
Well, I mean, here, by the way, Walmart just announced that they're starting to do this. You don't think of Walmart as that really customer-focused company, but they realize how important it is. They are at first offering this only to first responders and essential workers, and then they're going to probably expand the way others have in the past. But brands are recognizing, small and big, that they have to change. And this is what customers and the consumers are demanding. It is the safer way of doing things. Everybody's starting to offer, free delivery, fast delivery, same day delivery, pickup, and everything else. You have to really think about what is working out there. Look at what people are doing in Asia. In India, where there is a complete lockdown, you can't even go to some of the stores that are a few blocks away. You have to use a service for somebody to deliver even milk and bread to you. So in different parts of the world, this is going to be different. So you have to think about what is happening in that parts of the world, in that parts of the U.S., in that parts of my county, and really understand the demand to try
Mhm.
to adjust your shopping experience that you're going to provide. Because if you don't, you're going to lose. And this is why restaurants that were able to provide pickup and delivery are still in business. In fact, my local pizzeria, they are super busy because
Mhm.
they were able, and they already had a digital integration with delivery services, and now they are. I just spoke to the owner. They said that they're twice as busy as usual.
Mhm.
So
Obviously,
think
with
about
that.
that quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have on here too is this idea that the expectation is that you're going to have faster shipping. You know, right now, even for Amazon, I'm sadly an Amazon junkie, but 2-day Prime, I'm like, was the best thing ever. Now it's delayed by a few days, right? They're still actually not bad. They're projecting out further than they actually deliver, so it's actually, they're
Depends what you're looking for. If
10.
it's toilet paper, it may be a month from now, and your neighbor may email you and say, "Do you have any spare rolls of TP?"
This is where we start to trade down, right, from Scott
That's
or whoever
right.
it is. But I do think that people are going to have higher expectations for shipping and that kind of stuff. We talked about drones, and this couple that had signed up for drone delivery of their groceries before the pandemic, and they're like on TV going, "This was the best thing we ever did," and we didn't realize it would be the best thing that we were ever signing up for, right? And husband's like, "Okay, she was right," kind of thing. So really interesting stuff happening in the space. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens to shopper marketing because that's been so tied to the in-store experience. I think that there's a newfound purpose for rich messaging and use of rich messaging across channels, right? Where we might not have seen it in SMS, it might become something that we see more often because it's a really clever, quick way to get your impression to that user, that communication to that user. And then smarter AI, powered recommendation engines. So like just smarter, right? Because things are so in flux, and you might think that because I use, we need that exposure to some of those secondary and tertiary brands. You might have wanted this, like for example, I'm on Walmart, I'm looking for, I hate to use the Bounty example again, but it's top of mind. What else can they say to me? Hey, you can't find this, try that. That's the kind of stuff that we're going to be looking for, and we'll see a lot more of. I think, was there a
Um,
question that popped
yeah,
up?
there is a question actually. I don't know who it is from. It says anonymous. I'm sorry, but it says for businesses that are offering free delivery, how is it impacting them? Sometimes the cost to ship is more than the product itself. Uh, that's an interesting question. Again, I don't know your business, and um, but one of the things to think about, free delivery, usually even with Amazon, is when you reach certain amount of purchasing, right? I think it's like
Yeah.
35 bucks or something
Mm-hmm.
like this when they
Well,
offer
yeah.
you free delivery. So you have to think about it, and maybe the free delivery is not same day delivery, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
slower. So hopefully you can bundle things together and force people to buy more, and then
Mm-hmm.
you offer free delivery. I
Yeah.
would not do a free delivery just because somebody buys a pen, right?
Right.
It won't make much sense, and you
Yeah.
have to do your own kind of a calculation of when is break even, and based on this drive it. But
Mm-hmm.
people
I,
are actually willing to pay. I'm sorry, Christina. I think people are willing to pay now more than ever for delivery and for service. I give 25% tip automatically to everybody that is delivering, for food delivery and stuff like this, when I go even and pick it up myself, just
mm-hmm.
because I'm so grateful for them. So free delivery is, you don't have to do free delivery for everything. So think about it a little bit more from economical standpoint. You don't want to kill yourself and shoot yourself in the foot, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question for people who are not able to afford shipping and that kind of stuff. Free shipping does help. I think to your point, Basco, like setting up those thresholds for shipping, right? So you hit this particular price point. And again, test this, right? If it's
Yes.
$35, is it $100? It varies so wildly from brand to brand. Check that out. What I saw was also interesting is, and the idea of bundling. What I saw that was interesting is the ability to create loyalty by having a specific day that you ship things to a user. If it,
Yep.
you find operationally things that kind of help balance out that cost for you. But there's no real one single answer to that. I think it's going to be a lot of, really nuanced by the type of products that you sell. Is it a type of product that people, is it multiple products, a single product, that kind of stuff.
Well,
You can also,
one other thing I was just going to add here that we've seen is actually people are taking long trips to go and do things and even pick stuff up that is miles away, tens of, 10, 20, 30 miles away, sometimes more, just so they can get out of the house. So obviously it depends on what you're selling and if you're local, selling to a local customer or somebody else. But people are willing to do interesting things about, they don't want to get out of the house. So think about that one. As long
and
as
then
you make it.
The last point I'll make, because in the interest of time, we'll move on, is if there's an opportunity to say to a user, hey, if you buy 3 of these, if it's a product that they'll reuse, right? Buy 3 now and do that kind of bundling. Buy 3 now and discount it, but still have that margin of profit even when you ship it to them. It's still worthwhile. So there's a lot of ways to kind of slice that particular onion.
And I wanted to add one other thing that I forgot to add to the list, but in Europe right now, for example, and here in the US, what we have seen is this vouchers and gift cards really being pushed by businesses, where you can buy kind of a IOU for businesses that they're still kind of closed, but they have loyal customers that they're willing to pay them for service that they're going to use in the future. As well as digital gift cards that are sometimes actually powered by blockchain. So you can actually trade it, and there is no physical card that you have to send somebody. It's all electronic, it's a mobile app. So think about some of that new technology that is out there that is really changing the way even small businesses are taking advantage of this, and can really change the way you do commerce in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of that, good piggyback, we won't belabor this, but this idea of, Amazon was kind of at the forefront of this, like, just go scan, limited contact with others, and get out of there and protect yourself and stay safe. So I think we'll probably see a lot more of this happening as things progress. We thought this was really interesting. Nike, always a stellar response, I have to say, to any kind of situation. For COVID response, this is no different. So, this chart here shows that their sales, it's in China, right? As to be expected, Q3, for them, it's not looking great. And there was some small shift down in Q2 as well. But what they did was they fired back with a really smart digital plan, and they've already had these things, this infrastructure in place, again, because they're always projecting and being as innovative as possible. But what I thought was really, really interesting here is that while sales were down for, expected to be down for Q3, one of the things that they are seeing is that because they've provided their, like Nike Plus One Club and these different fitness apps for free, they've seen active users rise by 80%. And along with that, that rise in active users is translating into sales, right?
Yep.
And the way that they're doing this is really clever, because they're creating typical Nike, posture, right? Which is really, I get giddy about it because it's just neat, right? This idea of like, if you ever dreamed of playing for millions around the world, now is your chance. So they're all over social media. They're pushing this free app. They're getting users excited. They're using influencers in the community. They're using huge, celebrity level influencers. And then they're showing you, like, here's some of your home workout essentials, right? Not a hard sell, because we're building ourselves into your lifestyle, right?
Correct.
And so this is a brand that we wanted to kind of flag as out there doing it across the board, and they've been doing it from day one. You know, from the moment that the pandemic hit, their response has been pretty stellar, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm looking at their statistics right now. Their MAUs actually went up 30 some percent to almost 11 million active users. Their
Wow.
DAUs are up almost 20% to 3 million active users. Downloads were very slightly down, but I think overall they were able to really re-engage their mobile users a lot more.
Yeah.
Create new categories of existing uh, merchandise and rebrand it in a way that people were really excited about, and do some very, very interesting things that are, hands down, Nike has been doing amazing work with their mobile app and engaging their users.
Yeah, and we'll keep a pulse on what they continue to do,
Yep.
and how they evolve this approach and see how the impact to their bottom line, right? Because ultimately that's what we're going to be really interested in at the end of the day as well. So another brand that's done really well, and I will preface this by saying, from what I've read for Pampers, this wasn't a response to COVID per se. It's all like kind of coincidental timing. They sent out a survey to women, mothers, asking, how would you rate yourself as a mom? And 9 out of 10 thought that they could do better, and had this kind of like less than stellar view of what they were doing and their inputs as a parent. And so they came out with this campaign called Show the Love, where it's like self-acceptance and the idea that motherhood is hard, and that as long as you're doing your best, you should be celebrated, right? And so what a great time to kind of pull at those heartstrings. I'm a mom, my son's been out of Pampers for a long time, but I still feel this affinity to the brand, right? And sample of one, I get it. But they're doing this on social. There's so many legs here for them, and they're building this repertoire of new moms. I know that a friend who just had a little girl in Texas, and so sharing this with her, it's like, look at what they're doing. This is so neat, right? And it's that warm, fuzzy feeling that really does help down the line, right? So we're seeing it translate into sales for Nike. It'll be interesting to kind of keep track of what happens after this campaign with Pampers as well.
Yep.
And then the last one, I'll let you take, Vasco, which is Carvana.
Yeah, so when we talk about commerce, it doesn't need to be just some small merchandise, shoes, clothes. People are selling basically cars now. Carvana has been pushing this on TV, online, and they I think that they were kind of in the first one in the U.S. to have the vending machine concept. Now they have this entire new concept of buying the car without ever touching it. And you have actually 7 days to test drive this car in like 400 miles to test drive it. And if you don't like it, you can send it back. And there are other companies we've seen do this. So you can, again, test different concepts. Obviously, they are being hurt, and now they're trying to figure out a new way. And hopefully this is working for them. I love to understand whether how successful this campaign was, but they are trying different things that are, when would you ever thought about buying a car without going and test driving it? I mean, wow. That's the one thing that you never can do. And now they're showing, hey, try it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I smiled at this. I started to go, well, is our entire definition of retail going to shift? And that is something I'll just need to think about for myself, but this is really clever. So those are just some couple examples from a retail perspective that we hopped into. Then we looked at travel, and this is not new news. We expect these decreases and declines to happen. And we know why, right? Year over year, and we're seeing the same thing. The projections for different countries come across here in this statistic from Statista. And what we think can be expected, travel is such an interesting one to put your finger on, but we do know from a mindset perspective, a mixed bag of emotions, right? So yes, we saw the revenge travelers in China Wonder how that's gonna, if or how that takes hold in the US and what percentage of users will actually do that. We think it'd be a smaller subset of the user of traveler base. The idea of new measures of cleanliness, which we have examples of to show you. The one that stuck out for me though was this idea of the shift in travel seasons, right? So we think we have this thing down, you know, since I think it was 9/11 was the last time, 9/11 and then 2008, that we saw some declines in travel, right? And we bounced back. I don't think it impacted seasonality at all, but this will impact seasonality specifically because we now need to, we're so vigilant about hotspots, right? And how the virus may or may not flare up again, that by the very nature of that kind of monitoring, if, for example, certain parts of the world are shut down again, God forbid, because we need to kind of resume the flattening of the curve, and kind of go back into lockdown, how does that impact, you know, travel to other parts? How does that impact supply, demand? How do the airlines kind of pivot around that? And so I think seasonality and the shifts will happen and be a little bit more ad hoc and less predictable, but you know, more to see there. And that kind of instability, I guess, could also cost, you know, lead to some cost fluctuations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and,
yeah.
and a couple of other things here to keep in mind, and you can go to the next slide and we can kind of talk about it. But you know, one thing you guys got to think about is local travel versus international travel, right? You know, this is going to be very big difference right now. And if you read, for example, what Alex Heffer from Trivago has said, you know, people, and he even suggests people, you know, save you money. And he just had a very interesting, kind of interviews about this. And I completely agree with him, even before I read it, that local travel, let's say the Bay Area, I can go to Napa Valley, or I can go down to Santa Cruz or somewhere else where I'm driving. I may think twice before getting in a plane to go to Miami or to New York, not because there are hotspots, but just because it's, you know, 6-7 hour flight. Forget about getting on a 20-hour flight to Asia right now for fun. I don't think that will happen. In fact, we just saw today, I believe, that JetBlue is the first company to really require face masks. Really? Today? End of April, and this
And
is
that's
when we're
for the
starting.
passengers, right? Because I think
That's for
some,
passengers, yes.
yeah, yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. You know, really, I think companies need to change. If you go to Hong Kong, for years and years, there were digital monitors, you know, checking your temperature as you enter, you know, the airport, from whether from one flight on every gate or something. And then there are people with hand thermometers checking and questioning you and asking you where you were, are you feeling well, or anything like this. I just think that this is going to really change. We have to really think about this in a much bigger way. And I think that travel companies have a opportunity to change this a lot. There are some very interesting articles, and you guys can read it. You know, how is Disneyland versus Disney World going to change, about you know, the people that are going to go there. When are people going to be able to get back to Disneyland and Disney World? You know, just imagine this massive number of people there. I can't. This is actually from my friend Kate. She just took you know, a weekend kind of getaway with VRBO, and to her that was just awesome. It just, you know, was like, you know, better than going on some island right now, just because she was stuck in home for a while. So think about local travel and how people are going to change this first. And especially now that gas prices are so low. So, you know,
Yeah.
our habits are going to change because of all this. And, you know, we'll see what will happen. But can we go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah, so we talked about the requiring of face masks. United required it for their personnel. Like we said, JetBlue is requiring it for passengers. Marriott actually just rolled out a global cleanliness council, and they've really outlined the steps that they're taking. But this kind of approach to cleanliness and the transparency around that is industry wide for the airlines now, because it's critical to have people feel safe in order to travel. And
Yeah.
so this is something that isn't a nice to have. It's kind of a basic now.
Yeah.
And people want to see that outline of how are you cleaning the plane, you know, once people deplane and people are boarding, right? What are the measures looking like? So we're
Correct.
seeing that. And then Airbnb, you can take this to Vasco. What you're
Yeah.
seeing there.
Yeah, I love what Airbnb has been doing, and I'm a big fan for many years. So if you go on their website, there are three things that right now they're pushing. They're pushing online experiences, so you can actually experience what other people are doing out there. In this case, you know, somebody with sheep. I see llama. I've seen other things. Dogs in Chernobyl. You know, they are also pushing month-long stays. In fact, my son is stuck in Tallinn in Estonia on a month-long stay. He's actually extending his stay for another month. You know, so I am painfully aware about that experience because I have to pay for it. And then they're also promoting companies like them and Oyo are promoting this stay for you know, essential workers. I think Marriott also did something similar.
Yes.
Obviously, many airlines are really relaxing their purchasing and refund options. Buy now, fly later. So, you know, they want to get your money, even if you're going to fly a year from now. Expedia makes it very easy for you to understand how you can cancel or change your flights because of the
Yeah.
changes with COVID. So it's all about, again, trying to fine tune and test different things and making sure that they know that, you know, you will come back to them, but in order to come back to them, they need to be a lot more flexible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the industry is changing for sure, quite a bit.
100%. Across the board, a big word that we're going to see, you know, and a big line for brands that succeed and don't could be the board transparency, right?
Yep.
Not just in how you're cleaning, but in the case of Expedia, you know, how do I actually, if I book a flight and I can no longer make it, how do I cancel that?
Correct.
Car, you know, they kind of created a new tier, kind of addressing the fact that we need to stay local. And looking at the, you know, also economically what people can afford. So the stay local plan, just a tear down, allows a little bit more access for people who might just need to bop around really quickly and do something in their neighborhood or community, and not necessarily do like a long distance travel, which is kind of what they were, you know, known for. But I think they've just kind of stepped it down just a tad more because of COVID. You were talking about this idea of buy now, right? Buy now, use later. And, you know, TripAdvisor, their bread and butter is the everyday person giving true accounts of their travel and reviews. And so one of the things that they're doing is called Love Your Local. So they're putting a local lens on this idea of tell us like your favorite restaurant, your favorite place to go. They've made it social, obviously, by the hashtag. You can see that. And so they're looking at where did you stay that was fun? Your favorite dining experience, a
Yeah.
list of favorite places to go to that are local, right? Because we're kind of committed to this, you know, 1 to 3 mile radius around our homes at this point in time for the most part for some of our basic needs. So I think that this is really interesting and really ties true to your examples of what the short term, at least, vacation will look like for many of us.
Yep.
Uber Connect and Uber Direct. So we're less of carrying people and more becoming couriers of things, right? And so they just unveiled these two new, services. One to deliver anything from your pharmacies and pet stores, and Uber Connect is the same kind of service that lets Uber users send items to one another. This is where we are today, right? So if I need to Uber something to you or send something to you, I can actually use Uber Connect to do that. Very
New business
interesting way of
models.
getting
Yeah.
things
Yeah,
to
they're testing new business models again, guys. I mean, there's, you know,
100%.
yeah.
But if you think of your mother who might, there's a lot of families out there with elderly parents who, if their, their kids live on one side of the country and they live on another, they rely so heavily on their community and neighbors and stuff to help them with grocery shopping and all the other stuff. What a cool way to kind of help with that, where it's like I can send these groceries. I mean, there's different ways to do it. It's just another avenue, another outlet for us to do this as well.
But they're also building better. They're building better loyalty. They're really reaching out to the human nature of what is going on and trying to be helpful. This is not just about, yes, it is about revenue and helping their drivers in the gig economy, but at the same time, they're doing something that is very essential to people. So it's really combining both. So this is something that is very controversial out there, using technology for contract tracing. I really, truly believe that this, if done and when done properly, will change the way of travel, the way of shopping, the way of going back to normal. It is working in Asia a lot, South Korea, China. Maybe some of the stuff that they're doing in China is a little bit too much because it's government data that is used for tracing and getting scanned, whether even you get on a bus or on a train or on a plane or even in a restaurant, whether you have green, orange, or red. If you get red, you get picked up right away, even I think with the orange in China. But my point is, there is new technology, both Apple and Google are working on technology that you can incorporate in your apps that later on are going to help, and it's going to be essentially, I believe, anonymous data.
Yeah.
And Bluetooth to kind of figure out social distancing with other people that may have been affected or infected. So yeah. I think this is going to change the world. We're not going to be able to do millions and millions of tests a day. So this, I think, I'm a big believer, this is going to change how we go back to normal.
Well, how rare is this, right? To have those two come together. And when we talk about the reach of an Apple and a Google, we're talking about half of the world's population. We're talking about 3 billion people have one or the other device.
New Zealand just launched this, and they had 2.5 million downloads in a single day. I think yesterday, the first day, 2.5 million downloads of the app. People went in and downloaded and started using it right away. Wow. So we'll see that differently in different parts of the world. People, take this in privacy differently. Germany rejected the use of what Google and Apple are trying to do. They want to change it based on their GDPR. But again, think about what the local, laws are, obviously. But I think overall, you have to explore it and start testing this.
Sorry.
Hey, we are working from home.
Someone's in deep trouble because he was supposed to keep him downstairs in the man cave until lunch. All right.
There is no app for that.
There is no app for that, but we need to work on it. But this is real life, everyone. But I think this is going to be really interesting. What happens with Apple and what happens with PII and how people feel about being traced. And the way that I understand it will work really quickly is it will be anonymous. Somehow, whoever you might have come in contact with will receive like a notification that, you're now, if you're positive, not that who you are, but that they've been in contact with someone who's now tested positive and that they should probably check themselves. Cool. All right. So some key takeaways, right? Perfect timing. Uncertainty is the new normal, right? Vasco's, been a huge on his soapbox about this idea of just rebuilding customer journeys, segmentation, and really just focusing on testing, test, learn, pivot, repeat, right? It's the only way we're going to get anywhere, and we can't lean into, the only way we can do this is to test and lean into the data, look for the stories, right? And again, the stories are both reflective, right? So we're looking backwards and saying, okay, well, I thought this, does what I see here in the data validate what I thought and my actions that I took from a marketing perspective or what have you, or operational perspective? And then predictive, like, okay, so I took that action, what happened? So I think this is a time where as marketers, we're gonna have to stretch ourselves as business people and start to really, truly break down any organizational silos and connect dots. Um, Social responsibility and brand reliability are pillars for driving loyalty, right? So we're seeing those warm, I know it sounds so soft and mushy and it doesn't feel like, okay, money in the bank right now, but it will be it goes a long way. And we've seen so many examples of how loyalty drives future purchases, and for generations it could happen, right? So this idea that however you're responding as a brand to COVID, even in a small way, right? As long as it's genuine to who you are, and that your brand feels reliable to the user, and that it has a sense of purpose within the larger community and within their lives, is a huge deal. Plan to reset everything. Again, this goes hand in hand with rebuilding all of your segmentation, or re-examining them, at least tweaking them. And when we talk about your toolkit, like what, if you typically, what do your media buys look like, and how are those going to shift, right? One example that I forgot to put in here that was really neat was how Burger King kind of bridged the gap between a TV commercial and getting someone to actually order in the app, right? Using a QR code. So the QR code is on in the commercial, and it's moving. You have to actually take a picture of it. You get a free burger using the app. And then you get, you go pick up your burger, right? So what a nice way to stitch from TV spot to app to the actual store, or a delivery experience. And then the
Yeah, I
last
mean,
piece here, yeah,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'll just tie it up real quick. The last piece here is like this idea of, we're looking for this, global inspiration, and one size will not fit all, but we can take some learnings and modify them in a academic and structured way through testing to see what will happen, as we look to possibly lightly extrapolate from one area of the world to another.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Christina. In the end of the day, my takeaway is that, again, test different things, see what works for somebody else. There is no reason to reinvent the hot, water.
Yeah.
It's look what's happening in Korea and Asia in general. There's so many good examples of what the certain businesses are doing there in different verticals. Definitely rely on data, but in the end of the day, if you're not digital, you're in trouble. Start thinking about this right now. And if you're digital, think about how can you go to the next level of digital, being completely mobile, being completely contactless. In Asia, in certain parts of Asia, you can buy stuff just with scan of your face at vending machines. There is no money there. There is, everything is mobile payments, and now they're using technology in ways that we're taking for granted. Even in India, I can use my mobile phone with a QR code and buy chai from the chai vendor down the corner, for 25 cents, and the money automatically goes into his account. So try to understand what works, what doesn't in different parts of the world, in different verticals. Give us a call. We have lots of examples and lots of ideas that we can discuss with you. Happy to kind of listen to your specific question and give you ideas, and go and play around and test things. But communicate, collaborate with others, and this is the best way. I think that certain verticals are going to do better, but you're going to have to be more aggressive and invest in technology and everything like that. So thank you guys. Again, our emails are here, Vasil at MoEngage and Christina at MoEngage. Shoot us an email at any time. We have chat on our website as well. So
Mhm.
we're there for you 24/7.
We're trying to keep a pulse on all of this. So yeah, reach out. We always have a good time kind of doing this, and look forward to chatting with you guys again soon.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, if there's any questions, ping us, and looking forward to talking to you soon again.
Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.
Good day. Bye.